What's happening, ladies and gentlemen? This is Min from Architecture Inspirations. Today I'm going to show you how to create realistic architectural renders in Lumion 10 in 1 hour. Let's get started. For this tutorial, there will be lots of topics to cover, so I will be using the new example scene in Lumion 10. You can go to Examples and select the scene here to get started. To navigate in Lumion, you can drag the right mouse button to look around. You can also left-click to select an object. And if you hold the O key and drag the right mouse, then you will orbit around the center point on the screen. To move around, you can use the WASD keys to go back and forth, left and right. The Q and E keys will let you move up and down. While navigating, you can hold down Shift to move faster. And if you also hold down space, then it will move the fastest. As you can see, this is a finished scene with trees, cars, people, and other objects already added to the scene. So what I'm going to do is hide all the layers of this scene and only turn on the tutorial house layer, which has the house all by itself. This will give us a fresh start, as if we had just imported the model into Lumion. However, the house looks like it's floating, so let's shift the house down to the ground level. To move an object, you can use these options to move freely, vertically, horizontally, or manually by typing in the coordinates for that object. We only want to move it vertically, so click here and move the house down like so. Now let's start editing materials. Let's move closer to the wood deck so we can see the material easier. Now we can go to the Materials tab and click on a material in the scene that you want to edit. After you click on a material, the material library will open. Now you can see that the imported material is highlighted because it was imported from our CAD software. To edit this material, you can click here to make it a standard material. Then the material editor window will open with multiple options such as colorization, gloss, reflectivity, relief, scale, and even more down here. When you apply the standard material, the settings will be at its default. This might make the material look odd, so what we can do is reset all these sliders by turning it down to 0 so we can start from scratch. Now let's go up here and click this button to load a normal map. Or if we don't have a normal map for this material, then just click here and Lumion will create a normal map for you based on the color map. The normal map will give your material more texture and depth by creating bumps on the surface. And you can control those bumps by using this relief slider here. If it's hard to see the bumps, you can use this colorization slider to override the texture with a color like white or gray. This will make it easier to see and adjust the material's normal map. Note that you can also click here to invert the direction of the normal map. This will determine which areas are being pushed up or pushed down. When you're happy with it, you can turn the colorization back down to 0. Next, let's adjust the glossiness and reflectivity by using the sliders here. This is mainly trial and error to see what works best for the material. Finally is the scale, which determines the size of your texture. Drag it to the right to make it bigger, and drag it to the left to make it smaller. If you drag it all the way to the left, then it will revert back to the original scale of the imported texture. Alternatively, you can replace any imported materials with Lumion materials. In the material library, you will also see a number of material choices such as color, glass, water, etc. And if you look up here, you will see different materials tabs such as various indoor and outdoor. Each of these tabs have lots of material that you can use for your model. You can choose whichever you like by clicking on a material to apply it to the current selection. And if you double-click the material, then you can edit it even more, similar to how we edited the imported material before. The glass material is a little bit different, because whenever you import a model with glass material, it will automatically be changed into Lumion's glass material. If you want a different look, then you can choose from the huge library of glass materials in Lumion. Or you can edit the material using these sliders here. Next, let's talk about some of these additional settings. The first two are position and orientation. The Position tab will let you offset the material in the X, Y, and Z axes, while the Orientation tab will let you rotate and shear your texture in different directions. You can be more precise by double-clicking, then delete the value and type in a value that you want, then press Enter. There's also the Weathering option, which is great for creating weather or aged materials such as an old wall or an old wood floor material. The slider at the bottom lets you control the sharpness of the edges of the surfaces. By making these look a little more rounded, your house will look more real and less computer-like. In Lumion 10, there's a new type of material property called Displacement. When applying materials, you might have noticed that some of the new materials have a new slider called Displacement. This is a new feature in Lumion 10. This is not available for all materials, but any material that have displacement will look even more realistic. You can adjust this slider to give the material more depth, but don't overdo it, otherwise it will look unrealistic. When you edit materials, try using the Weather tab to adjust the sun so that you can study the material in different lighting conditions. It's looking pretty good. There we go. Now just use these workflow and edit materials in your model. But to save ourselves some time, instead of editing all the materials, let's turn off the tutorial house layer and turn on the finished house layer. Next, let's work on adding context around the house. If you remember, we already have some elements like road and terrain in separate layers, which we turned off at the start of the tutorial. So let's turn on the terrain layer and the road and sidewalk layer. These layers are basically SketchUp models that were imported into Lumion, and the materials have been edited or replaced to look better. For example, this material here was originally a solid green material in SketchUp, but it's been replaced with Lumion's landscape material. Instead of using landscape grass, you can also use 3D grass to make it look even more realistic. You can use it by going to the material library. Under the Various tab, click here for 3D grass. Here you will see multiple categories of 3D grass, which include checkerboard grass, circular grass, clean-cut grass, farm grass, row grass, and wild grass. Just choose whichever works best for your scene. You can also double-click the material to edit it even more. Here you will see lots of settings. The colorization slider will let you override the color map using another color. You can change that color here. Down here are the map scale and rotation sliders, which determine the size of the texture and also its rotation. Now let's move a little closer to the grass and adjust the next two sliders. The gravity and bending force sliders determine how the grass blades are affected by gravity. The next two sliders will let you control the size and length of the grass blades. The next slider controls the curliness of the grass blades. The roughness sliders determines the glossiness. And finally, the grass cut slider will let you cut the top of the grass to simulate freshly cut grass. That looks good. But an important thing to keep in mind is that 3D grass takes up more performance and it can slow down your render time. I recommend using 3D grass only for areas that are close to your render's viewpoint. In my case, I will switch back to landscape grass so that the editor can run a little faster. Besides the road and terrain layers, there's also a layer with some background houses. This will help make the site look less empty. These houses over here were also imported from SketchUp, while these over here can be found in Lumion's library. Another material setting that I want to talk about is the Foliage material property. Over here, you can see that on the outer walls of the background houses, there are some leaves. This was made by adjusting the foliage settings in the material editor window. Here you can increase the spread of the leaves and the size as well. There are also many types to choose from. You can also offset the pattern here, and the final slider allows you to adjust how far the leaves will spread from the ground level. If you click here and go to the Various tab, then you can use one of Lumion's leaf materials. This material has similar settings to the Foliage material property, but it doesn't have the ground level slider, so this is good for creating hedges, while the Foliage material property is good for creating ivy walls. The cool thing about using layers in Lumion is that you can easily switch between different design options or different environment in your scene. This example scene also includes a lake object that we can use instead of the road. So let's turn off the road layer and turn on the lake layer instead. This is also a model imported from SketchUp. Originally, it had a water texture from SketchUp, which was replaced with Lumion's water material. Lumion has many types of water material that you can use, from ocean water to lake and pool water. You can double-click the material to edit even more if you like. Here you can adjust many settings such as reflectivity, wave scale, and even color. If you don't have time to model landscape elements in your CAD software, then you can use Lumion's Landscape tab, which includes a number of landscaping tools such as the Ocean tool, which creates the ocean with one click. Or you can create a smaller body of water using this button here. Let's move up a bit, and now we can click and drag the left mouse to draw a surface of water. You can change the elevation with this up and down arrow, and resize it with these horizontal arrows. There are also several types of water that you can use. There we go, now it looks like the lake that we had earlier. But since we will be using the imported road and lake models, let's delete this water surface and turn the road layer back on. There's also a sculpting tool that you can use to transform the landscape in your scene. For example, let's fly over here and use the raise tool to add some mountains. First, let's increase the size and speed of the brush with these sliders here. Now we can paint an area where we want to add mountains. If it's too tall, then use this option to lower the land. This height is good, but it's too smooth, so we can use the jitter tool to make it more jagged. If it's too jagged, then we can use this tool to smooth it a bit. Just repeat this process to create your ideal landscape. You can also flatten the landscape with this tool here. There we go, now we have a mountain behind our buildings. When editing the landscape, you can also paint with the paint tool. Here you will see the different materials that you can use to paint the landscape. There's also the brush size and speed sliders that we've seen in the sculpting tool. But there's also a new slider, which lets you adjust the tile size of the material. Clicking the arrow above any of these materials will let you change it. Lumion comes with a collection of landscape materials that you can use. Alternatively, you can click here to choose a landscape style preset. There are many to choose from, such as a snowy environment or a desert environment. And finally, the last button lets you turn on and off the side rock material. You can also change that material here. I'm happy with the original style that we use, but feel free to choose whatever works best for you. Now let's populate our scene with some objects. Lumion comes with a whole library of objects that you can use to populate your scene. You can find them in the bottom left section in the Objects tab. Let's go to the Nature category and click the Placement button. This will bring up a library of all the trees, plants, and other nature objects available in Lumion. As you can see, we are in the Broadleaf Trees category, and there's already so many pages of them. There are many other types of trees, plants, flowers, and even rocks. If you have a particular tree type in mind, you can also use the search option and type in the name. For example, we want to place a palm tree. There are lots of different types here. Let's pick this one. As soon as you select one, it will be available under the cursor. Clicking in the scene will let you place the object. Then just click again to place more of the selected object. To delete an object, click the trash icon and click on the object to remove it. You can always change the position after you place the object. To do that, click on the Select tool or press M on your keyboard and drag the little dot at the object's origin to change its position. You can also use the Rotate tool here or press R on your keyboard, then click and drag to change its orientation. If you want to be more precise, you can use the orientation slider here. Next is the scale tool, which lets you resize the object. Just drag up and down to make the object bigger or smaller. There's also the size slider here for you to use as well. By changing the scale and rotation a bit, you can use just one tree object but still make them all look slightly different. Instead of doing this after you place the object, you can also do it just before you place them. Let's go back to the Place button. For example, if you press the R key before we click in the scene, we can change the rotation of the object. This is very useful when placing cars. Pressing the H key and move the mouse up and down will let you change the height. This is not necessary for placing trees and cars, but it's very useful when placing flying objects like birds or helicopters. Finally, there's the L key, which lets you change the size of the object. You can use these hotkeys to refine your object's placement before you place them. When you select an object, you will see a property window on the top right of the screen. Now click this arrow to show the advanced settings. There are a number of options here, such as focusing on the selection, or you can find a selected object in the library in case you want to place more of that same object. If you click this option here, then it will select all identical objects in the scene. These next options let you reset the size and rotation, or randomize rotation, size, and position. There are also these settings down here which let you space objects evenly, align size, rotation, and many more. You can also put the selected objects in a group with this button here, because if you rotate objects right now, it will look like this. But if you put them into a group, then go to the All category and select the group, we can rotate all of them while keeping their position relative to each other. Then you can keep them in a group or ungroup them if you want. As you can see, these commands are very useful for managing your objects. Another useful button is this one up here, which lets you replace the selected objects. Clicking on it will open Lumion's object library, and here you can choose an object that you want to use as a replacement. This is very useful when you want to replace objects without placing them in the scene all over again. There are also settings that let you modify the object itself. It depends on which object is selected, the settings here will vary. Since we selected a tree, here we can change the transparency. This is good for instances when you want to position a tree in front of a house but still want to be able to see through the object. There are also options to change the leaves color. Remember that you can select all the trees at once and change it. This is great for creating an autumn scene. As for cars, you can change the color here, and you also have the option to add or remove the driver with this button here. When placing people, you can change the coloring so that they are completely black or completely white. And that's how you place objects in Lumion. However, this can take a really long time if you place objects one by one like this. So let's talk about other types of object placement. The first one is mass placement. To start, select an object in the library, then choose the mass placement option. Now you can choose a starting point by left-clicking a spot in the scene and click again to choose the endpoint. Then you will see a new window with settings for the mass placement. The first slider lets you adjust the number of items. And here you can choose the direction of the objects. You can also randomize the direction, spacing, and offset. If you want to change the position, you can move these points here. Then if you press Ctrl and click, then you can add more points to extend the path of the mass placement. You can right-click one of the points to remove it. To add more items, just select the object in the library, then click the plus button to add. Repeat this process to add more items as you need. You can also replace existing items by clicking on the picture of the one that you want to replace. To remove an object, just double-click the trash icon. There we go, that's how you can use mass placement to add objects to the scene. You can also use this tool to add other objects such as cars and people. When using the mass placement at the curve, you can hover over the nodes and increase the smoothness using the slider. Then move that node to a better position, and repeat that process until you have the perfect path. Another type of placement is the cluster placement. It's quite simple, just choose an object in the library, then select cluster placement, and click on the scene to place copies of that object randomly in a small area. This is great for placing bushes and small plants. The final option is the Paint Placement tool, which is a new feature in Lumion 10. This is basically the cluster placement tool, but even better. Just select an object, then click and drag anywhere in the scene to place the objects. You can also adjust the density slider to place more objects. Clicking on the trash can icon will let you erase the objects from the scene. Note that if you place different types of objects in the same area, then use the Erase tool, it will only remove the object that is selected in the library, even if the object was placed using other tools like Mask Placement and Cluster Placement. This new feature is definitely one of my favorites that I will use a lot. Now I can easily create a forest in an instant. Just keep in mind that the more objects you place, the heavier the scene will be. So try to not go overboard with the amount of objects in the scene. For example, these trees are so far away that we might not see them in detail anyway, or some might not even show up in the final render. So as an alternative, you can use low poly objects like this, which was built to serve as background trees. However, sometimes you need a really detailed tree for the foreground of your render. In Lumion 10, there is a new collection of nature objects called Fine Detail Nature. This is a library of the most beautiful trees and plant objects I've ever seen. Because they are extremely detailed, as a result, they will make your scene heavier and can slow down your render speed. So I recommend you use the Fine Detail Nature objects sparingly. For example, the best use of a Fine Detail Nature object is to place them strategically so that when you create a render, the Fine Detail Nature object will be close to the foreground so you can take advantage of all the details. Now that you've learned how to place objects in the model, just repeat this process for the rest of the scene. But to save ourselves some time, let's use the objects that are included in this example scene, which we have hidden at the start of the tutorial. So first, we need to remove the Lumion objects that we placed. To do that, let's zoom out to see all the objects in the scene. Now we can select a category of objects that we want to select. For example, the nature category. Then we can press Ctrl and drag our left mouse button to select all the trees in the scene. Now we can use the delete button and click on one of the objects to delete all of them. Then just repeat this process for other objects that we want to delete. There we go. Now we can turn on the background trees layer and the cars and people layer to show the objects that are included in this example scene. Now that we have populated the scene, let's create some images. To do that, go to the photo mode. Then this window will open. You can see that this project already has some images, but let's create some new ones. To create an image, move the camera to a good view by using the same navigation keys as in the build mode. This slider here also lets you adjust the focal length. Dragging to the left will make the camera angle wider, and dragging to the right will make the camera angle narrower. Or I can double click and manually enter a value, then press enter. Next, you can use these arrows to move the eye level up and down, or you can manually type in a specific height here. You can also reset the eye level to the default height of 1.6 meters using this button here. And finally, this button will let you set the eye level horizontal. This is useful when you want the camera angle to be parallel to the ground. Then click the Store Camera button to save the current view. Let's do a test render of this image so we can compare the before and after later. That doesn't look too bad, but let's add some style to the image. Here you can see that the custom style is selected. If you click on it, you will see that Lumion has provided lots of presets for you to try, such as realistic, interior, daytime, color sketch, watercolor, etc. You can try any of these for your render. For example, let's try the realistic style. As you can see, a style is essentially a stack of effects that is optimized for quick use. With the style preset applied, our render already looks a lot nicer than the previous render. If you have noticed, our image has been rendering in the preview window even before we export the image. This is possible because of the new feature in Lumion 10 called High Quality Preview. You can turn it on and off by going to the settings and click on this icon here. I really like this new feature, so I will leave it on. This really helps us know what it will look like when it's rendered. Now let's render the scene again to compare it to the previous render. As you can see, with some quick work, our render is already so much better. What's cool about the style preset is that you can disable or edit these individual effects to make it fit your style better. Or you can add more effects if you like. To do that, click on the FX button. There are different categories of effects, such as sun, weather, sky, objects, camera, animation, etc. Let's add a real sky effect, which is an effect that uses HDRIs or high dynamic range images to light up your scene. You can see that a new background has been added. Now you can make adjustments using these settings. First is the heading, which determines the rotation of the HDRI. Then there's the brightness and overall brightness, which control the brightness of the render and the background image. I can also change the HDRI by clicking here. Lumion 10 comes with a total of 39 HDRIs in different categories, including cloudy, evening, morning, overcast, sunset, clear, and night. I will choose this one. As you can see, even though we can adjust the brightness of the background image, we cannot adjust the contrast of the sunlight and the shadows. So let's add a sun effect. Now, using the sun height and sun heading sliders, we can adjust the sun position so that it's in the same position as the sun in the background image of the real skies effect. Then we can go back to the effects stack and compare the before and after. You can see that this gives us a similar lighting position as the real skies. And now, we can adjust the brightness of the sunlight however we want. As you can see, using the sun effect with the real sky effect will give you more control over the sun's brightness, which is not possible with only the real sky effect. It's also important to note that you need to have the sun effect above the real sky effect for this to work correctly. Another important effect is the reflection. Here is already added to the stack of effects, so we can just click on it to edit. First, I will make sure that speed ray reflection is turned on. And then I will click here and add reflection planes. Reflection planes simulate accurate mirror-like reflections no matter where the camera viewpoint is. The drawback with adding reflection planes is the increase in computer processing and render time. The more planes assigned, the more power is needed. Note that you can also change the preview quality here. As you can see, with the reflection effect, our reflections in the window look way more realistic. Now let's create another view. When creating a new view, instead of adding styles from scratch, we can go back to the previous view and click here, edit, then copy effects, and go to the new view, click the menu, edit, and paste the effects here. There we go. That's a super fast way to transfer effects. If you want to save your style for later, you can click here and save effects. And then later, you can easily load it in or share it with your colleagues so everybody can use the same style. Since we have two views that are similar, I want this new view to have a lake environment instead of the road. So let's go back to build mode, turn off cars and people in the road, and turn on the lake layer. Then go back to the photo mode. But as you can see, changing the layers in the build mode changes both of the views. So how do we control what we see in each view separately? To do that, we can use the layer visibility effect under the objects category. And now we can control which layers we want to hide and which one we want to show in our view. When you have a complex model like this, it's a good practice to use the layer visibility effect in all the views, so that even when something changes in the build mode, the view will not be affected unless we want it to. Now let's create a nighttime view. I'll choose the night style preset and make some changes as I need. Let's also turn off the sun effect and add a real sky effect instead. Then we can change the background to one of the new night skies that come with Lumion 10. However, for this scene to look better, we need to add some lights to our model. So let's go back to the build mode. Here in the Objects tab, click on the Lights category and click on the Place button to start placing some lights in the interior of the house. There are many types of lights in different categories, such as spotlights, omni lights, and area lights. I would choose a spotlight and place it on the ceiling. But as you can see, we can't see the full effects of our light because it's daytime in the build mode. So let's go to the Weather tab and change the sun height to make it nighttime. Now we can see the effect of the light a lot better. When you select the light, you can change its color, brightness, cone angle, etc. Now let's make copies of this light. To duplicate a light, you can hold Alt and drag the light. If you hold X, then it will move the object in the X-axis only. Just repeat this process to create more copies of the lights. Now let's press Ctrl and drag to select all these lights. Then duplicate them over here. This time, we can hold Z to move them along the Z-axis. There we go. Just repeat this workflow to place more lights wherever you want. We don't have to be too accurate when placing them because we are focusing on exterior renders. It's starting to look pretty good. The scene actually has some lights already placed, so I will select all these lights and delete them. Then turn on the lights inside and lights outside layers. Now let's go back to photo mode and export our night's render. That looks pretty good. Next is the Precipitation Effect. You can add this effect by going to the Weather category and select Precipitation. After you have added the effect, you can change whether you want to create rain or snow using the slider here. Sliding this slider to the right will allow you to naturally transition from rain to snow. Next is the Precipitation Phase slider, which controls how much snow or rain is on the ground. The particle quantity and size sliders will control the amount and size of the snowflakes or raindrops. As for these sliders here, they allow you to control if the rain and snow are blocked by plants and even your model. The Block Bias slider helps add more snow in your model, which creates more details, making it more realistic. You can also add fog using the slider here. Let's add the precipitation effect for the nighttime view as well. However, for this render, let's use the rain effect and adjust the other sliders until it looks like it has stopped raining and the street has some puddles of water. That looks good. Next, let's create some videos for our project. First, click here to go to the movie mode. Here you can see that this project already has some movie clips. But I will show you the basics of creating an animation in Lumion. We can start by clicking on a blank slot and choose Record to create a new clip. This is where you can set up the camera path. Similar to the photo mode, we can adjust the camera settings using these options here. Then, let's move the camera to a good position and click this button here to set the first keyframe. And move the camera to another position, then click that button again to set the second keyframe. Just repeat this process to add more keyframes for this clip. If you want to edit a keyframe, you can click on it and move the camera to a new position, then click this button to update it. You can also use a small arrow to insert a new keyframe between clips. Once you are happy with it, you can click here to preview the movie clip. You can also adjust the length of the clip using these arrows here. Remember that slower camera speed is often better. If you want to delete a keyframe, then click this button here. I usually use only 2 keyframes per clip because it often leads to better results. Lumion 10 also has these 2 options, which make the camera move slower at the beginning and end of the movie clip so that it has a nice transition. When it's turned off, the camera speed will be consistent throughout the whole clip. I like this feature, so I'll turn it back on. Now we can add some styles to the movie clip. But first, I will do a test render. You can render out the entire movie using this button here, or you can use the render clip button to render individual clip. Here we can set the output quality level, the frames per second, and the resolution. Since we're doing a test render, I will start with a lower quality, less frame per second, and lower resolution. And now, one by one, the frames I created for this movie and blended together into an animation. Here's the first version of our video. It looks good, but we can improve it by adding some styles to the clip. Like the photo mode, the movie mode has some style presets which you can select and fine-tune to your liking. Or we can go back to one of our photos and copy the style we created in photo mode by clicking on the button with the 3 horizontal lines here. Then copy effects. Then go to our new movie clip and paste the effects. Then you can edit the effects if you like. As you can see, the movie clip looks even better now. Next, let's talk about animating effects in movie clips. For example, we can animate the sun and clouds to create a time-lapse effect. In this case, we will use the sun effect to simulate the passing of time. To add some movement to the sun, we can use the sun heading slider. First, let's adjust the sun heading to a position that we want and click here to add a keyframe, which is indicated by this little dot here. Now move to a different point in the clip and add another keyframe. Then we can use the slider to change the sun's position. There we go. Instead of using the sun effect, we can use the sun study effect, which allows you to set the exact geographic position of your project. But you can see that it's not working. That's because we need to turn off the real skies effect. Now we can edit this effect, then click on the pencil icon and choose a location that you want to use. You can see the exact coordinates of the selected location down here. You can also edit those coordinates more accurately with these sliders here. There are other settings such as time and date that you want to simulate in the scene. There we go. Now just use the same workflow as before to animate the sun path. In this case, we only need to animate the hour settings. This is really useful to show clients how your design will look with accurate real-world lighting. To make this look even better, let's add the skies and clouds effect to add some clouds movement. Here, we can increase the cloud speed to animate the clouds. It's already looking good. You can also use the slider to increase the amount of clouds, and you can change the cloud's direction with the slider here. There we go, looks pretty good. Before we add another effect, let's go back to the sun study effect. Click this arrow to move to the second keyframe and change the hour to around 8 p.m. so we have a day to night animation. I also want to make the clip longer, so I can click this pencil icon and increase the duration of the clip. Now let's talk about animating layers. For example, I can create one keyframe here and another one when it's nighttime. Then I can turn on the lights layers. There we go. Now I have an animation where lights turn on at night. But there's a better way to do that. Instead of going back to the build mode, we can build with effects, then go to the lights category. Now hold Ctrl and drag the left mouse button to select all the lights. On the property window, we can turn on the night activation mode. This will make the lights turn on at night only. Looks good. You can also set it to random so the lights will turn on in a random order. That looks good. But if you notice, the people are not moving at all, while the lighting and the clouds are moving at super fast speed. So when doing a time-lapse like this, it might be better without the people. Let's go back to the build mode and create a new layer, then double-click the name and rename it to people. Then we can select all the people and move them to our new layer. Back in the effects stack, we can go to the layer visibility effect and turn off the people layer. There we go. The time-lapse effect looks better without people standing in one place. But sometimes you want to animate people and objects. Before I talk about animating objects, let's create another movie clip. Instead of recreating the position of the camera here, we can go back to the previous clip and click here, then select copy clip. Then we can paste this clip in the new slot. This will copy all of the effects as well. And now we can make changes to it. Let's remove the skies and clouds effect and the sun study effect by double clicking on the trash icons right next to their names. Then let's turn the real skies effect back on and turn on the people layer too. I forgot to turn on the birds layer earlier, so let's turn that on as well. Now let's talk about animating objects in Lumion. First, let's add a move effect to our clip. Then click on the pencil icon to start editing. Now click on this arrow to set the starting position. And now we can set the starting position of an object. Then click this next arrow and move the object to the ending position. Then click here to finish. There we go, super easy. However, this would take a really long time if we have lots of objects in the scene. A better way to animate objects is to use the mass move effect. So let's remove the move effect and add some cars in our model. Since I only want a few cars, I would just use the single placement tool to place them. But feel free to add more cars with the mass placement if you like. I will add cars for both lanes like so. Now let's go back to the movie mode and add the mass move effect. We can click on the pencil icon to edit. Then let's fly up high and create a path that follows this row. Here we can adjust the width of the path, and here we can set the speed of the object. Then press on Recalculate Path and press play to preview the animation. And now the car is driving. We can always adjust the path and the speed of the car if we need. Now we need to do it for the other direction as well. But instead of adding another path, we can reposition this path so that it's in the center. Then increase the width to fit both lanes. Then I can click here to make this path two-directional. Then let's recalculate and run the animation again. That looks good. But here you can see that at the end of the path, our cars disappear. So let's edit the path and Ctrl left click to extend it. At the corners, you can click on the nodes and use the slider to make the corner smoother. And again, feel free to add more points if you need. Perfect. You can see that the cars parked on the sides of the roads are not moving. That's because they are outside the path. Only the cars in the middle of the road are moving, which is exactly what we want. Now just repeat this process for other paths, such as the bicycle lanes and the sidewalks. That looks good. The cool thing about the mass move effect is that you can go back and easily change the position of an object or even add new ones. As long as it's on the mass move path, then it will work seamlessly. When working on a new clip or a previous clip, you don't have to redo all the paths again. You just need to add the mass move effect, then go to the previous clip and copy the settings of this clip. Then paste it in the mass move effect of the other clip. This will save you a lot of time. For this new clip, I will add the depth of field effect, which is a good effect to control the focus of the camera. First, let's use these sliders to make the camera focus on the leaves. These settings include amount, foreground and background, focus distance, and sharp area size. This will be the first keyframe. Now let's move to the next point on the clip and add another keyframe. Then adjust the focus distance to make it focus on the house. We can animate other settings too, but I will use only the focus distance because that's all we need. Remember that you can always go back and refine the effect by adding more keyframes if needed. Next, let's add a precipitation effect for the scene. And change it from snow to rain by dragging the slider to the left. Then let's go to the beginning of the clip and add a keyframe for the precipitation phase and particle size. Then set both to 0. Now move to the next point on the clip and add another keyframe for both settings. Then we can increase these so that it looks like it just started to rain in the scene. We can adjust the other settings too if we want. For a better look, I will change the real sky's background to one of the overcast skies. When doing a nighttime animation, you can turn on the car lights by going to the build mode and select the cars, then adjust the light intensity here. You can also add spotlights for the car's headlights and group them with the car so that these lights will move along with the car. This will make moving cars look more realistic. In Lumion 10, there's a new effect called Aurora Borealis, which is sometimes referred to as northern lights. Here you can adjust several settings such as brightness, color shift, speed, time offset, scale, and heading. With this new effect, your night scene will look amazing, especially with animation. The clips are looking really good. Now let's get ready to export. Since I created my own movie clips, I can remove these which came with the example scene, but you can keep them if you want. You can also hold and drag a clip to move it to another position. When you're happy with your movie clips, you can click this button here to preview the whole movie. The little white lines on the timeline indicate where the next clip starts playing. Instead of using effects and style for each clip separately, you can add them here for all clips. Some effects are only usable for the whole clip, like side-by-side 3D stereo and sound. I will add the sound effect. Now we can add a song using this button. Then preview it by hovering your mouse over the speaker icon. To fade out the music at the end, move to a point near the end of the clip, add a keyframe for the music slider, then add another keyframe at the very end, and adjust the music to 0. Now if we preview it, you can see that the music fades out as the clip ends. Pretty cool, huh? There we go. Now we can render the entire movie with this button, or you can render individual clips as well. There's also an option to render an image sequence of all the frames. And that's how you can create realistic architectural renders in Lumion 10 in under 1 hour. If you like this video, then be sure to check out the other 2 videos where I show how to render when you have less time, but still be able to achieve good results in Lumion 10. That's all for today, guys. Leave a like if you enjoyed the video, comment below and let me know what you think of Lumion 10. Stay inspired, guys, and I'll see you next time.